If you've spent any time in the Oxygen Builder community or other WordPress communities online, you'll have heard terms like metabox, custom fields, custom field groups, all those sorts of terms. And what we're going to do in this video is cover all that you need to know as a beginner to metabox and custom fields in general, and why you should be taking advantage of them, especially if you're working with an Oxygen Builder website. So what we're going to do is take this example site that I have, we are actually building. This is going to end up as a real site in the future, but essentially this site is going to take advantage of a lot of things that Metabox can help you do. So we can create a custom post type, we can create multiple custom fields, and if we have time later in this video, we'll also add in some filters through WP Grid Builder, which is by far and away the best filtering plugin for WordPress. So let's take a quick look at this site. So this is a website for essentially like a car sales business. And what we have here is an archive template. So if you don't know what that means, the archive template is essentially the listing of all the posts in a given post type. And so in this case, what we'll probably do is create a post type called maybe vehicles or inventory or something like that. And this is the screen that's going to display all those. We're going to create that custom post type using Metabox, and we're going to add in other custom fields, things like mileage and, transmission type and fuel type and all those sorts of things. So if we move over here to what is going to be essentially our singular page, we're going to have the brand, we're going to have the year, the vehicle name, description. We can have the image gallery, things like mileage and transmission, like I've already talked about, and then we will have a form at the bottom as well. We may not get to all of this because my main focus here is more on the Metabox fields and how to create those and incorporate that into your website, as opposed to all the nuances here that you see, but we will definitely take advantage of a lot of this. So I'm going to start from the beginning. So if you've never used Metabox, if you've never used custom fields, this is definitely the right video for you. I'm going to try to walk through things and explain them very clearly so you can understand why we're doing things in the way that we're doing. If you're someone who is well familiar with Metabox or advanced custom fields, this video might not be for you, but I definitely appreciate you sticking around. And if you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. Watch the video to the end, and I very much appreciate it. Okay, so here we are in the WordPress installation. We're going to go ahead and get started. And as you can see in my site here, the only plugins that I have are the base Metabox plugin, which is required. We have the Metabox paid version called All-in-One AIO, which is what this is. And in my opinion, without AIO, Metabox is pretty much unusable because there's kind of like a base framework that exists, but you have to go out to a separate site, generate the field groups in a functions.php file, pull them back into your WordPress site. If you're using Oxygen, it's kind of usable, but it's also really difficult. So if you're going to use Metabox, you definitely need to purchase the paid version so that you get the GUI and all these other options to create your post types and field groups and etc. Now, the other thing to be aware of, and I know this is a Metabox video, but I want you to be aware of all the options available to you. Advanced Custom Fields has been around a heck of a lot longer. There's huge libraries of content out there for ACF. They have a free version that's very capable, and there's also ACF Extended, which is totally free as well, and that takes your capability to the next level. Most of my previous tutorials have used ACF, and they've of course also included ACF Extended. I'm still a big ACF lover, but I have been learning Metabox so that I can get familiar with it and understand the comparisons. So I have Metabox, Metabox AIO, and Oxygen 4.0 RC1 installed. That's about all we're going to need for now. This is the same site that we started working on in a different live stream. So there is some existing design on this site, but for the most part, you can see it's pretty clean with very little in the back. So the very first thing I want to do in our example here is use Metabox to actually create a custom post type for this site. So what we're going to do is go to post type. Now, if you're not familiar with a custom post type, essentially it's just another option over here on the left side, similar to pages and posts, and that will give you the ability to add posts to a specific area. We can create Oxygen templates for that. It can have its own layout and design, and it's just a great way to organize content. So you'd create a post type for something like maybe your team members. If you had multiple locations for your company, you'd create one for locations or stores. And then in this case, we're going to call this one probably vehicles or inventory. I haven't quite decided yet. So we'll go ahead and click on new post type here. So our plural name is going to be vehicles. I think I want to go with vehicles as opposed to inventory. So plural is going to be vehicles. And then our singular name will be vehicle. The slug here is what you want the actual name in the URL to be, vehicle, if I can spell that right. There we go. So our slug is actually going to be, yoursite.com/vehicle is going to be what the archive of your post type is. And you'll see that a little bit later. You can drop these slugs off if you want to. That's not terribly complex, but not going to be covered in this video. So don't really fret over this. So this is all good enough for now. You can also go ahead and change all the labels. All these different items are totally fine at default, so I pretty much never go through these labels. I never edit them, and I don't really think you should take the time to either. In the advanced options, there's really not a whole lot here for you to consider. One of the main things is this hierarchical option. So this basically gives you the ability to have parent-child post relationships. So if that's applicable in your particular use case, you could go ahead and turn that on. I'm not going to have parent-child relationships, so I'll leave that off here in my case. The other option that I like to do is changing the icons. So Metabox gives you this visual, indicator of all the available icons. Let's try to find something in here that looks vaguely vehicle related. Perfect. There's a little car icon right here. So that's going to work perfectly for us. The other thing that you want to make sure, this is on by default, but we want to make sure the has archive is set to true or enabled right here. So that way we can create an archive template for this post type in the future. Okay, so let's scroll back up to the top and go to the supports tab. So this is all the standard stuff you're probably familiar with in your posts and pages. So the post title, the editor is just the WordPress content box, where you have bold and all your other formatting options. If you want excerpt, if you want to be able to control the author, you can turn all of these individual things on. The thumbnail is, of course, your featured image. So probably something like this is what you would want your post type to look like. And that will be pretty much all we need to worry about here. We haven't yet created a custom taxonomy, but if you wanted to be able to access categories and tags that you've created, let's say in your posts here for those categories and tags, you can have those, available and selectable on this particular post type. I typically like to create custom taxonomies so they're unique and I'm not crossing over terms between them, but there are examples where you might want them to be shared and others where you might want them to be separated. Very heavily depends on your specific use case. So we're going to leave the taxonomies alone. So we'll publish this post type. And now you can see we have this new vehicles post type here. So this is going to allow us a new area to pop in custom posts that only show up in this vehicle section for us, which is just awesome for organization and of course front-end control for the future. So let's go ahead and add a new post here. We don't yet have any custom fields, but that's totally okay. I just want to show you how this is going to work. Now, because this is a vehicle website, there is a few things we probably want to do in this case, such as custom fields for the year, make, model, and so on. But our post title is probably going to be something like, 1990 Toyota Light Ace, something like that. But I am going to create custom fields for year, make, and model. So this is a little bit redundant, but you do need to give this a post name because this is going to dictate what the URL of your post is, and you're also going to use that in various places across the site. So now we'll go ahead and just publish this. I am going to go ahead and install Classic Editor on this site too, because it just makes it easier to see your custom fields, and I personally prefer it. So I'm going to go do that real quick. Okay, so we're back here now, and you can kind of see a little bit better some of the things that we set up earlier. So we have, of course, the post title enabled. This is the editor right here. We have our post featured image, and then we have our excerpt and our author, which we enabled in the supports tab of our custom post type. We probably don't want to give the user the ability to edit in Oxygen for this particular post. So what we can do is actually go to settings in Oxygen. Under our client control, let's go ahead and click on this vehicle, save those changes. So we're basically hiding Oxygen on this custom post type. So if we refresh, then our Oxygen meta box is gone. And that's confusing. Our Oxygen dialog, I think it's technically called a meta box. Our Oxygen dialog is gone in that particular section. Okay, so if we take a look at this car here, there's a couple other things we need to add, but we don't have places for that yet, which is where our custom field groups is going to come in. So our mileage, transmission, and fuel is going to be something that we want to add in as data points, and that way we can see it on the front end and we can filter with it in the future. So let's go over here and go back to MetaBox. We're going to go to Custom Fields. We will create a new field group. This field group title doesn't matter, totally up to you. You can call this whatever you want. So we could call this, vehicle data points. And the first thing that I like to do, because I always forget to do this, is go to my settings tab and apply the location of where this post type should appear. Now, of course, it defaults to post. You could have this show up in multiple places. Pretty much any post type can have these pop up. But in our case, we only want it to apply in the vehicle post. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll go ahead and leave that and switch back over to our fields. So when we add a field, there's tons and tons of different options here. If you're unsure of what to do, you can almost certainly just go for a standard text field because you can put just about anything in that and work with it easily on the front end. So if you have a website URL and you're not sure if you want to use a URL field or something like that, text field's totally fine. If you have a number, again, text field is totally fine. Metabox is definitely a bit confusing, and some of these other options down here are, in my opinion, really hard to understand. There's 4 image fields here. There's image, image advanced, image upload, and single image. Like, why? That just, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. We'll come back to that, so I just wanted to point that out. You're definitely just going to need to play with this sometimes and figure out which one is going to be the best for you. So, like I said, we can just go ahead and set most of these data points to text fields. So let's first of all go with something like mileage here. We can just give this a label, and you can see the ID of the field changes here. It's going to do that automatically for you. So if you feel like changing the ID, it's only going to matter if you were to try to call these fields in a code block. So it's totally up to you. You can also give these descriptions. So there can be a label and then input description inside of the field. You can have default values, placeholders. You can set it to required, which you probably will want to do. You can set prepend and append text. So there can be things before and after, which Oxygen's dynamic data dialog can bring in for you, which is great. And another cool feature of Metabox is you can create these to be clonable. So these are kind of like mini ACF repeaters in one, where you can set there to be multiple rows of the same bit of information. So instead of there needing to be multiple different text fields, if you wanted there to be multiple rows of content in that section, you can go ahead and set this to be clonable. So let's just say we do want this to be clonable. Maybe in this case, we want to show our mileage and our kilometers of this particular car. So we could make it clonable. We could say max number of clones is 2. And then what we could do is just go ahead and publish this to take a look at it on our actual post over here. I'll open this in a new tab and we can take a look. So if we scroll down here, our mileage, we now have 2 separate fields. And for whatever reason, there's actually 4 fields here. I guess I accidentally typed in 4 there instead of 2 for our max number of clones. But now you can see that there are 4 different lines of information here. So maybe there's a data point that you have that all kind of share the same, name, such as mileage. And you want the user to be able to add in multiple rows of content. Maybe if there was multiple awards, or if there was multiple locations where this happened, or something like that. These clonable fields are unique to Metabox, and they are pretty handy as opposed to having to rely on ACF repeaters. Now, in this case for mileage, this is not going to be clonable, so we'll go ahead and just leave that as is. In the case of mileage as well, you might consider doing something like a number field here. The numbers can be a little bit frustrating to work with sometimes. So I typically, again, I just like to go with the standard text field and keep it nice and simple. Now, other than that, there's not a whole lot else for us to look at here except this columns option. So of course, if you think about a 12 column grid in the backend, you can set how many of those columns this particular field should take up. So if we have, let's say, based on our layout here, we have mileage, transmission, and gas, then maybe we want these all to be in one row. So we could go columns of this particular field is set to 4. So now if we go with a text field again, and we call this one maybe fuel type, then we could again go ahead and set this one to a column of 4, and now it's going to be our mileage, our fuel type, and then next up we'll do transmission. Now it just dawned on me, for fuel type, we're only ever going to have 2 options, which is going to be gas and diesel. So this is actually going to be better suited as a radio option here. So what we can do is just go ahead and in this choices option, we can type in gas and diesel like that. We can say required, and then if we want these to be inline, such as side by side, we can turn this checkbox on. So that's perfect. We have another field type that we've been able to take advantage of here. And then the next one, we're going to go with another radio in this case, because our transmission type is also only going to be a few choices ever. So there's no real reason for us to type that in every single time. So we'll call this one transmission type. Our choices will be manual and automatic. Again, we'll go with inline, and we'll set the columns to 4. We'll also set this one to required as well. So now if we go ahead and update this, we have 1 text field and we have 2 radio options. So if we go refresh our vehicle, you can see here is our field group coming together. So our mileage, let's say, is 130,000. Our fuel type, let's say in this case, is diesel, and our transmission type is going to be manual. So now you can see all of those are not only inline for the option that we set on the radio, but because we chose the columns of 4, that's why the layout looks like it does. So we can just go ahead and update this to make sure it saves those selections that we just made. Now, what are we going to put in the content box here? So this would probably just be the description of the vehicle. So in this case, we're just going to grab this lorem ipsum text from Figma. We'll just drop that, right here. We're actually going to drop that in here. And then I want the featured image to be kind of the main image of the vehicle. So I'm going to grab this one off the page. We'll go with inspect. We will save this image and we will set that as our featured image. Now we're probably going to want a gallery of photos because this is a car website and you're almost certainly going to want a gallery. So let's go ahead and create that as well. I'm going to go with update. And we do have a custom post type with some data and some custom fields already coming together. So coming back over to our field group, the next thing we're going to want to do is figure out what's the best field for gallery. So you can do a couple different things here. Of course, there was the single image from earlier. We could go ahead and set that to clonable. We could say the max number of choices is going to be, 6, 10, 12, whatever you want. However, if I'm not mistaken, I think the image advanced option is actually the one that we want. So if we go with clonable and sortable, then we should be good to go here. Let's maybe say our max number of choices is going to be like 12 or something like that. Max number of clones, I should say. So let's go ahead and just publish this. Let's actually call this field gallery, and then I'll change the ID to gallery as well. So image advanced should be exactly what we're after. Okay, and here is that field in the backend. So we're going to click on add media. And of course, these are all different cars, but I'm going to click these. I'll just add in these photos too. So you can kind of see here is our gallery. These are, click to drag and sort. So we can set it up like that. And that's pretty much perfect. We're going to see how this works on the front end though. This may require some tweaking on the front end when we get to the Oxygen side of things, but let's go ahead and update this post and let's create one more while we're at it. So we're going to go with add new, and this one is going to be 1994 Mitsubishi Pajero Mini. So we'll go, I actually just realized we didn't create the other fields for the year, make, and model. So we can definitely go ahead and do that as well. Same thing here though, we could just go ahead and drop in this lorem ipsum. Our mileage, let's just say, is 98,000 on this one. Our fuel type is going to be gas, and our transmission type will be manual. This is the actual Pajero Mini right here. So I'll stick that in our gallery, and let's set that as our featured image and then publish that. So now we have two different cars added here. We do have, of course, a couple more fields that we need to create to make this searchable and sortable on the front end nice and easily, but we can go ahead and do that as our custom fields as well. So let's go ahead and create a select field. So this is going to be essentially like a drop down for us. So for this label, let's go with make. And our choices are going to be Toyota, Mitsubishi, maybe Honda, Subaru, and that'll be fine for now. Now, there's a couple of other options you can take a look at here. In our case, we're not going to have multiple brands, so we're going to leave multiple unselected. We'll say this is required. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing. So columns is going to be 4. And then the position in the field group does actually matter. So I want this to appear above the gallery. So I'm just going to toss it right there so the make appears. And one thing to consider is now we have 4 fields with those columns set to 4. So what's going to happen is it's going to add up to 12 and then start a new row. So 4, 8, 12. Now make is on a new row. So next up, we can do another select field. And just for the sake of example, the select to option is kind of nice if you have a huge data set that you want to be able to search. So I'll show you what this looks like, but I actually wouldn't use this particular one in this, this website just because our options are not going to be that massive. This might actually work though in this case, now that I think about this, because I was going to make this one the year, and then our choices, we probably would just type this out manually. We could go 1990, 91. I'm sure there's a list of years that we could easily copy and paste. We'll do a couple of these. This is not that hard actually. Then maybe we'll just add a couple others, something like that. So that's nice and easy. We're never going to have multiples again. We'll require this. We're not going to have a toggle all option, and then columns we're going to set to 4. And then again, we're going to want to take this year and maybe stick it above. So it's year, make, and model on the front end. So we'll update our field group and then go ahead and refresh. So now you can see we're starting to get some more options. So we probably need to change this to have a default that's blank rather than it defaulting to Toyota, just in case it's not actually Toyota. But this dropdown does look way better, as you can see. It's also searchable, so if I typed in 1996, I could easily hit that. So I think I probably will, even though I said I wouldn't, I think I probably will change this make to the select advanced so that it's just a lot more friendly and much easier to find the make that you're after, especially if you start to get a lot. It'll just be easier to type in the first couple letters, hit enter, and move on. All right, so I'm going to go back over here. We're going to go to make, and I'm just going to select these just in case when I change to the select advanced, it did keep my choices, which is what I wanted. So perfect. All right, and then next up we had the model. So if we go with the field, This is totally up to you. You could, again, go with a select field and just add the different models in that you're going to sell, or you could just have a text field. I think I'll probably go with a select advanced field again, and we're going to call this one model. Now, of course, in a real car situation, you'd probably want these to be chained together, so only the models that are under a particular make would appear. That's probably a topic for a future video. We won't do that now, but I am totally aware of that, that's how you would actually want this to function. So in this case, our models are going to be light ace. We'll go with high ace. We'll go, I think there's actually a space between these. And then we'll have Pajero. We're going to have Pajero Mini. Maybe we're going to have a Cappuccino for Suzuki, even though Cappuccino is spelled wrong. There we go. And then what would be another one? We can go with Impreza WRX or Impreza, WRX STI, something like that. All right, and then we're going to go with required. Once again, not gonna have multiple of the same model. We're gonna go with columns of 4, and we will stick this above our gallery. So perfect. Year, make, and model is what I want. That's a little bit hard to drag, but that's okay. So update, and once again, we're going to refresh this. And now we have a few more things to do in here. So we said this is a 1994, so we're gonna go 1994. Apparently I didn't make that a year. Yes, I did. I just didn't type in the proper field. This one is a Mitsubishi, and then the model is Pajero Mini. So perfect. I am going to go ahead and just select a couple more images for this particular gallery so we have some other stuff that pops up for us on the front end. So we'll update that now. Okay, so let's quickly recap what we've done. So in MetaBox, we've created a custom post type here that we called vehicles. Inside of that, we created a custom field group. In that field group, we have, 7 custom fields. And now we can actually start configuring those to appear on the front end. We'll be able to pull in all of these in our Oxygen templates using dynamic data, and we can create both the archive and the singular template. So let's go ahead and get started. If we move back over here to our Figma design, what you're looking at right here is the single listing. If I take off this layout grid, you can see this a little bit better. So these are going to be all the data points that we just created. So the top one up here, we're going to use dynamic data to pull in the model, then the year, then the actual, I said model again, but I meant make. You get what I mean. The description is going to appear, the gallery, all of these different data points down here. So we have all of the data that we need, and now we just need to set up our template to do it. So let's actually go over here to our Oxygen templates. We're going to create a new template, and we will call this vehicle archive. We will have it inherit our main template, which apparently there is not one for us to inherit. I know that's true. Why would that be? Let's take a quick look. That's really odd. I want it to inherit my main template. Maybe this is an Oxygen 4.0 RC bug. Let's see if we can figure this out though. What I actually want to do is apply this template to our archive and our post type of vehicle. So we will go ahead and publish this, and hopefully once this reloads, then we can actually select our main template. We can't. That's super weird. Basically what would happen in this case is we're not going to get our header and footer from our main template, but that's going to be okay. After all, we are using a release candidate. This is not a real live version yet, but by the time you watch this video, it'll probably be fixed. So let's go ahead and click on Edit with Oxygen to get started. So I realized I may have accidentally deleted the contents in that main template. We won't worry about that for now. Essentially what we would have had is this header with these menu links and then our footer, but that's okay. Not super worried about that for this particular video. Now what we're going to do is create a repeater that is essentially full width, and then we're just going to center these data points and have it bring in the background image for us. So let's go ahead and create a section. Inside this section, let's toss in a repeater element. And because we're on the archive template, we actually don't need to change our repeater query. We can just go ahead and leave this as default, and hopefully this repeater loads for us here. Okay, so forgive me for switching back to Oxygen 3.9, but unfortunately I couldn't get that template to load the repeater at all in Oxygen 4.0 RC1. So I'll of course try to troubleshoot that some more outside of this video and report whatever bug I can find. But essentially, I just went back to the stable version of Oxygen 3.9, and we went ahead and loaded into that vehicle template. There's some oddities here, I think, because of, like caching on the old version that I was using. So let's just go ahead and restart here. We're going to add in a section, and we're going to toss in a repeater. What I was saying before is we are on the vehicle archive template, so we don't actually need to change the query of our repeater here. So what we're going to do is add in a heading. We could go ahead and insert the data of this post title and insert, And now you can see those are the two vehicles that we created as those posts in our custom post type. I'm going to go ahead and save real quick, and then I'm going to hard refresh this template to hopefully resolve some of this weird glitchiness that you see. Okay, so of course our goal here is to actually make it look more like this. So what I'm going to do is on our section, I'm going to make this section under size and spacing full width. I'm going to basically take this repeater. We're going to set this to 100% width, which it already is. Our div that wraps this, we're going to set as a background image, which is going to be our post's featured image, and size, let's just say large, and insert. So there we go. There's those images. Of course, they don't look good right now, but we can easily fix that. So let's go ahead and set this to cover. We're going to go with left 50% and top 50% to center those images. And then how tall are these? So these images are 400 pixels tall. So let's go ahead and set this div to a minimum height of 400 pixels. And it looks like we have an overlay on these. So we have this fill color at 55% opacity. So we're going to go with background image overlay, set that to this color and go with 55%. On this div, I'm going to go ahead and set the typography to white so we don't have to set it individually. And then we can go ahead and set this to center vertically and center horizontally, just like that. Now, the other thing is we actually probably want to change our background position here to contain and no repeat, perhaps. I want this to stretch even if the image isn't the correct size. I think cover and no repeat is going to be perfectly fine. We'll see how this actually behaves on the front end. Turns out these aren't the best images, so we'll need to work with that. But I'm going to keep going because that doesn't really matter for this example. Now, so let's go ahead and take a look. So this is our hover state. So when you hover over it, it turns pink and then it adds in this learn more button. Okay, so the other thing is our section here has some default padding on the left and right that we can go ahead and drop out. So the image is stretched to the far bounds of the container. So let's just quickly save this and look on the front end. And yeah, there we go. Just like I figured, there's a weird little oxygen bug. You can see that the image is stretched to the left and right sides. Now, of course, this is going to take a lot more finessing to make this look right. And of course, these images just aren't quite right proportionally to make this work. Perhaps some of these side photos would be better rather than the photos that I chose, but nonetheless, you kind of get the point. Now, this hover effect is going to be a little bit tricky. I think it's going to require some custom CSS. So let me give some thought real quick to how we're going to achieve this, and then we'll move forward from there. Okay, so to achieve this hover effect layout, what we're going to do is use a pseudo class on this, which is basically taking advantage of the before and after pseudo states, and we're going to make this just appear on hover. So this is going to be some CSS, nothing too crazy, but you should definitely use these because they're extremely powerful. And once you see it used once, you're going to find all kinds of other use cases for it. The reason why we're going to go this route is if on this div we set this to a hover background and the image color, then you can see you actually lose the transparency effect here, which is kind of disappointing. So that's actually what's taking place here. If we hover over it, then of course the transparency goes fully away. So let's clear out this hover state. And what we're going to do is grab this ID of the div here. And outside of our repeater, I'm actually going to add in a code block because I don't want this CSS to be repeated across my site. If I wanted it to show up on every page across my entire site, then I would do this in a style sheet as opposed to a code block. So we're going to just comment out that PHP. In our CSS, we're going to add the little pound sign and the div name that we just copied. We'll use that as our regular state. And then again, I'm just going to toss this in and we're going to go with before. And then you need a content element here. So our content is just going to be that, basically just a blank bit of content. We're going to set position to absolute here. And then we'll set our top to 0. And then we're going to go with left to 0 as well. Then we're going to set our background to our color from before, which I actually don't have on my clipboard. So I'm going to switch back over here and let's go with the hex color, wherever I can grab that from. Right there. So the RGBA is actually what I meant, not the hex. Okay, and then we need to set the width and the height of this before state. So we're going to go with width of 100%, and then we're going to go with height of 100% as well. And so there we go. There is our overlay state like that. Now, of course, we only want this on hover. So this is actually going to be kind of like a stacked hover state like this. So we're going to go with hover and before. And so now when we hover over that, then it's going to show up on hover. Now, but as you can see, whenever I hover over one, they both pop up. So we probably want to change this to a class as opposed to the specific ID, because of course in Oxygen 3.9, which is fixed in 4.0, every div has the same ID. So the code is actually working properly, but it's just an Oxygen nuance as to why it's not. Now, creating this little like hover effect was not actually the point of this video, so we're going to keep moving here. But if I go ahead and on this div, I should be able to add a class. We'll just call this one overlay. And then in our code block over here, we can just simply change this to .overlay, apply that code, and it seems like we're going to have the exact same issue. Maybe let's take a look on the front end and see if it works. Oh, the other thing I forgot to do is on this div, we need to go back to our ID and let's go to layout and set this to relative. Save this, and then on the front end, if we hover over it now, it works just fine. So that is perfect. The other thing we probably want to do is on our heading here, we probably will need to set this heading to have a higher z-index so it picks up on top of the content here. So maybe let's set a z-index of 25. And so what's going to happen is it stays over the top of our before state, and that way it doesn't have the opacity applied to it. So let's go back over here real quick, and on our heading, which I actually need to click in our structure panel because I can't reach it because of that z-index problem, we'll go layout and z-index we can just set to 25, and there we go. So we do have one other element here, which is this button. So let's go ahead and add in a link wrapper, and then I created a button class before. I think it was this one. Yep, that should work just fine. And then our text, once the repeater reloads, is just going to be view vehicle. And then on our link wrapper class, we're also going to set the z-index here to 25. And there we go. Now there is a different styling in terms of transparency. I don't want to get too deep in this rabbit hole. We haven't quite got the MetaBox stuff on the page yet. The only other thing we want to do here is just on this URL in our repeater, we're going to set this to the post permalink. So each one links to the actual post. So taking a look on the front end, now we have this linked to our post here, but of course we don't have a template. So we can go ahead and move on to that, get that template quickly set up and bring in some of our MetaBox fields. So let's go back to our admin panel. And now we're going to add a vehicle singular template. So we'll call this one vehicle singular. And this is going to be the individual kind of template for each post that we made. So we're going to set this to singular and vehicles for our post type. Publish this. And again, normally I would inherit my main template for my header and footer, but we're not going to do that in this case because of course I think I broke my template earlier. Okay, so in Figma, we can actually switch over here. So again, let's go ahead and start out with a section. And we're going to create a div on our left side, and then I'm going to add in another div that will contain the content for our right side. So on this div, we're going to go ahead and add in a text element. This text, we're going to go to insert data, which is our dynamic data dialog. We'll go with MetaBox field, and we'll find the one that we're actually after, which in this case is going to be year. So we'll just go ahead and select the label. Doesn't actually matter in this case because we didn't configure that in the backend. So we'll insert that. Then again, we're going to go with another text element. We'll go insert data, MetaBox field, make. Again, we'll use label. And then once again, we're going to go with a text field here, insert data, MetaBox field, and we're going to go with model. Insert that. So these are the dynamic data points that are coming from those MetaBox fields that we created earlier. Now, if we take a look at the styling, we do have some stylistic stuff going on. So the manufacturer is a lot smaller, and then these are a lot bigger. So what are these? It is 72 pixels and 600 font weight. So let's just go ahead and change those. Let's create a class called something like, vehicle data. Font size was 72, font weight was 600. And then I don't know if this is a Google font. Smooch Sans, interesting. Smooch Sans, there it is, perfect. And then we can just take this vehicle data class, apply it here, and then we'll need to do a little bit more styling. So what I'm going to do is take this text element, wrap it with the div, and stick in another text element. Set that to position horizontal, and then I'm actually going to use a gap class here of maybe just like 8 pixels to separate those. Or, well, maybe 1 EM is going to be the better class there. So that's kind of separated and looks perfectly fine. So this is Lexend 700 font size of 14, and it's caps. So 14, we're going to go typography, uppercase, and then looks like Lexend is already applied. So that'll be fine. That actually looks really small. So maybe we won't go 14. Maybe let's go like 18. Oh, actually, you know what? I messed up the layout here. So it's year, 1990 Light Ace, Toyota. I don't know which one I like better, actually. It really doesn't matter. I think I'm just going to go ahead and leave this as is. There is some letter spacing there, so I think that's why this one looks a little bit different. We're going to switch this back to inherit, and then our letter spacing, it was something like 12%. That made absolutely no difference, so maybe let's go with 2 pixels of letter spacing. Okay, so what else do we have up in this header? We have a button here that says reserve now and some text. So I'm going to go back to this div here, and in that I'm going to add a link wrapper. This one, I'm just going to use the same button primary class. It's not styled correctly, but that's okay. We're just going to say reserve now is our button, and that's starting to look pretty good. So now in this div over here, I can go with text, insert, and we're going to go with post content. So that is what we need there. And then we need to go ahead and position these two to be horizontally aligned, middle, and then let's set a max width on this div. So that is going to be 548. So we'll set this div to max width of 548 pixels. Now we'll set the section to space between, and that's starting to look perfectly reasonable, I think. Next up, we have the gallery. This one might be a little bit tricky to implement, kind of specific to the mockup. So I think we'll probably skip that for now. But instead, what we're going to do is going to section. We're going to create a gallery. We're going to go with metabox. Our metabox field, I actually don't think is going to work with the one that we created, but I could be wrong. So we're going to go with metabox, custom fields, vehicle data points. And then our field name for our gallery was called just gallery, coincidentally. I didn't think this was going to work. So we're going to have to change the field type here. Okay, so I fixed it. All that I had to do in here was just change the field setting. Image advanced actually works totally fine. What didn't work is having this set to clonable. So as soon as I turned it off, what you can see in the back end is it still behaves pretty much identically to the way that it did before. And now in my Oxygen gallery element, I could set the metabox field to the field ID, which was just gallery, and voila, it works perfectly fine. So I think with some finagling and some tweaking, we probably could get this gallery to look how we want it to. But maybe what we'll do for now is just go with something like a grid. We'll go column count of 3. And I think that's honestly going to be perfectly fine for now. It doesn't look that good, but you kind of get the point. The point of this is more to show you the dynamic data and the connection of Metabox and Oxygen as opposed to specific layout techniques. This is probably a video that's worthy of its own entire video, kind of the idea of like dynamic sliders with Metabox, which I've done one on ACF, so I'll do one on Metabox in the future. If you're interested, drop that down in the comments if you're interested. Okay, and then next up we had this cool little like semi-transparent section. I think what I'm gonna do in this case to get us more along the lines of what we have in that Figma doc is create a section. We're gonna set this to however high it was in terms of height. I bet it was probably 500 pixels. I'm gonna set the background of this just using standard data right here, something like that. And actually, I think I'm gonna use a div instead of a section. The reasoning is just, it's a little bit easier to position the height of the div and the contents inside of it. So we'll go min height 500. Background, we're going to go with, again, this same image of the van. Cover, we'll go left 50% and top 50%. So now what I can do is add in another div, and this one is actually going to be the one that has this kind of semi-transparent glass effect to it. So RGB, oh, this is the actual background color of it right there. So we're going to set this div to a background color of that. And then how wide is this? So max width of 737, max width of 737, width of 100%, margin left and right auto. And then we'll go with margin top auto to push it all the way down automatically like that. And then what's our paddings look like? So we have 28 top and bottom, and that'll be pretty much perfect. So we're going to go 28. And 28. And we'll stick another div inside of this that we can just very easily center again with some margin, margin left and right auto. These divs are getting a little complicated, but I'm doing this because this one is our background, this one is our kind of glass container, and then this one will actually be the contents. So I think I'm even going to add another div to kind of control the layout and positioning of this. So we'll call this one car data. Inside of that, we're going to add a little text element, and this one is going to be something like mileage, mileage. Then we'll go with another text element. I want to take a look at how this is styled real quick. So this one is 12 and that one is 18. The top, actually they're all caps. So 12 and 500 and then 18 and 400. Okay, I think that's just too small. I think I'm just going to leave it as is. So in this one, we're going to go with insert data, metabox field, mileage is the one that we used, 98,000. I'm going to go ahead and lay out vertical and center these. This text, we're going to go with font size of 18. And even though these are numbers, I will go ahead and set this as uppercase because later we can use the same styling. So something for us to consider here is we created this div with the class of car data. So what we could do on this is go car data mileage. And then I'm going to copy the styles from my ID to my class. And then that way, when I clone these, if I need to make a change to one of them, it will apply to all of them. Let's do the exact same thing to this. So we'll call this one car data underscore heading because they're all going to have that same styling. And then these divs, we can just basically duplicate twice. The next one was transmission type and fuel. So we're going to go with transmission as our second item here. Double click this, insert data, metabox field. We will go with transmission type, and this one must be clonable because it's asking us for a separator, which we don't actually want. So I'm just going to ignore both of those options. As you can see, it does bring in the manual option for us perfectly fine. And last but not least, we're going to go with fuel type, and then insert data, metabox field, and fuel type, insert gas. Perfect. Okay. So now let's take this container horizontal. We're going to go with a gap on this container of probably 32 pixels. If I know my designer, which I do, then that's my guess. Ooh, wow, I was way off. 96 pixels. Sheesh. 96 pixels. And there we go. So then the other thing that we need to do is kind of slice the div, which we can do with a clip path. So what I typically do is go with clip path generator. I always forget which one it is. I think it's this one. And then realistically, all we need is this parallelogram. So I'm just going to take this CSS. On this div, I'm going to go to custom CSS and just slap that in. And it's way too steep, but you kind of get the idea. So maybe like 15, ooh, even less than that. 10%. And then we'll go with 95%. Is that right? Or is it sharper? I think that's about it. I'm going to stick with that for now, and then we can go ahead and stick on this little box shadow. So the box shadow is this color and 44160. So advanced effects, box shadow, 44160 and 0. And then the only other thing is this kind of overlaps the section beneath it. So we could actually just use some negative margin on this. So maybe something like 75. Oh no, 75 is too much. Negative 60 pixels. And then I think what I would do is just go ahead and add some extra padding. So we did negative 60. So let's just go with like 125 pixels of space there. The only other thing I'm going to do is on this div, I'm going to set the z-index to just be slightly higher. So maybe something like 5, and then we just don't have any weird overlap issues in the future. So let's go ahead and save this and take a look on the front end real quick. So we can look at all these dynamic data points. So we have our individual year, make, model, we have our description, and then down here we have our mileage custom field, we have our transmission type and our gas, and of course we have this gallery that we also created with the image advanced metabox field. All that's wrapped together in our metabox custom post type here that we called vehicles. So one other thing I wanted to touch on real quick right before we wrap up is that in our LightAce post, what we didn't do was fill out some of these other data points. So our year, let's just say 91, Toyota LightAce, and then our gallery images, let's just put this van, we'll put the logo and the airplane so we can kind of see something right here. Then if we go ahead and update this, we just created that singular template, so we don't have to redesign it for this particular post as well. So now you can see we have the LightAce We have all the other options. So this is our mileage, our transmission type, and our fuel type is now dynamic. So if we switch back over to this post, it's a little confusing because the van is there. But then you can see the mileage has changed, the transmission and gas type has changed, and our gallery has changed. So that's where all that dynamic data is coming from in our Oxygen template tied back into Metabox. So hopefully this has been a great introduction for you to kind of see how you can take advantage of Metabox. All this stuff that we just did was with only Metabox and only Oxygen. So it's pretty incredible how far you can get. This video is already way too long, so I know I touched on the filtering, but I think I'm going to create a separate video on that. I'll probably get this site more fleshed out, maybe on a live stream, and then we can come back and add some of the filtering on it. I think that's going to be a great video, so there's a lot more for us to do. We'll have a video on Metabox dynamic sliders and Metabox filtering with WP Grid Builder. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.